June stepped off the transport ship and looked around the huge space station. Everything was enormous. The walls were 3 times taller than any building back home in Seoul. Strange aliens walked everywhere, talking in languages that sounded like clicking insects or growling animals. Their universal translators made the sounds turn into words he could understand, but it still felt weird. He carried a small bag with his few belongings. Most of the other new students had arrived with servants and fancy equipment. June had a change of clothes and his father's old military boots. That was enough. The Galactic Military Academy was the most famous war school in known space. Only the strongest, smartest, and most dangerous beings got invited to train here. June was one of only 3 humans who had ever been accepted. The other 2 had quit during the first week. As he walked through the main hallway, aliens stopped and stared at him. Some pointed and whispered. Others laughed. A few looked curious, like they were seeing a strange new animal at a zoo. June kept walking and tried not to show that he was nervous. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. Windows showed the black space outside with distant stars. Ships bigger than city blocks moved slowly past the station. This place could hold 1 million people, maybe more. Other new students walked in groups. There were tall gray aliens with too many arms. Short thick ones that looked like walking rocks. Some that floated in the air without touching the ground. One group had bright blue skin and moved like dancers. They all looked strong and confident. June felt very small and very alone. A loud sound echoed through the halls. It was time for the opening ceremony. Everyone moved toward a massive room that could hold thousands of people. June followed the crowd and found a spot near the back. The room filled with hundreds of new students. They came from dozens of different worlds and looked like nothing June had ever imagined. Some had scales, some had fur, some looked like they were made of metal. The noise was incredible as they all talked in their own languages. Then everything went quiet. A figure walked onto the stage at the front of the room. It was huge, even bigger than the other big aliens June had seen. It stood almost 9 feet tall and looked like it was wearing black armor, but June realized that was actually its skin. It had 4 arms that ended in sharp claws. Its head was long and narrow with too many teeth. "I am Instructor Vextar," the creature said. Its voice was deep and scary, like rocks falling down a mountain. "I will be training some of you. Most of you will not survive my training." The alien students around June shifted nervously. Even the biggest and strongest ones looked worried. "This academy has trained warriors for over 5,000 years, Vextar continued. "We have taught kings and generals. We have created legends. But we have also buried failures." Vextar walked slowly across the stage. His 4 arms moved in ways that made June think of a spider. "Some species think they belong here because they are strong. Others think they belong because they are smart. A few think they belong because they are brave." The instructor's eyes seemed to look directly at June. "They're all wrong. You belong here only if you can survive what we will do to you." Vextar stepped down from the stage and began walking through the crowd of students. Everyone moved away from him as he passed. His claws clicked on the metal floor with each step. "Weakness will be removed from this academy," he said. "Like an infection that must be cut out. Some of you do not belong here. Some of you should never have come." He stopped walking. He was now standing right next to June. "Humans," Vextar said, looking down at him. "The newest species to join our galactic community. Weak bodies. Short lives. No natural weapons or armor." June looked up at the massive alien towering over him. Every instinct told him to run, but he stayed perfectly still. "Tell me, human," Vextar said. "What makes you think you can train with real warriors?" June opened his mouth to answer but never got the chance. Vextar's primary arm moved faster than June could see. The back of the alien's armored hand hit June's face like a hammer. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the silent room. June flew backward and hit the floor hard. Blood poured from his broken nose and covered his shirt. His eyes watered and everything looked blurry. The room was completely quiet. Hundreds of alien students watched to see what would happen next. "Humans are too weak for real combat," Vextar announced to everyone. "This one will be gone within a week." June slowly pushed himself up to his knees. Blood dripped on the metal floor beneath him. He wiped his face with his sleeve and looked up at the instructor through watering eyes. "How long does it take a Crothan spine to grow back?" he asked quietly. The question was so unexpected that several aliens started laughing. The sound spread through the room until hundreds of students were making various noises that meant amusement in their languages. But June was not joking. He was asking because he wanted to know. He was asking because he was already planning. The next morning, June woke up before the alarm sounded. His nose was still swollen and both his eyes were black and purple. The medical robot had fixed the broken bones, but his face still hurt when he touched it. His roommate was a tall gray alien called Kix who had 6 arms and skin like rubber. Kix looked at June's face and made a sound like air leaking from a tire. The translator said it meant sympathy, but June was not sure if that was right. "You should go home," Kix said while getting dressed. "Vextar will kill you if you stay." June put on his training clothes and said nothing. Going home was not an option. His family had used all their money to send him here. More importantly, he had made a promise to himself when Vextar broke his nose. He was going to finish what that alien had started. The training hall was bigger than a football field. Machines and obstacle courses filled every corner. Other students were already there, doing exercises that would be impossible for humans. The rock-like Makari were lifting weights that could crush cars. The flying Zephyrians were moving through the air like birds. The Veltar were working together without speaking, their minds connected like a computer network. Instructor Vextar watched everything from a high platform. His 4 arms were crossed and his black eyes looked for any sign of weakness. The first test was running. Simple running, except the course was designed for aliens with different abilities. There were walls 20 feet high, gaps 30 feet wide, and obstacles that moved and tried to knock students down. June watched the other students complete the course easily. The strong ones smashed through barriers. The fast ones jumped impossible distances. The flying ones simply went over everything. When his turn came, June could not do any of those things. He was not strong enough to break the barriers. He could not jump far enough to clear the gaps. He definitely could not fly. But he could think. Instead of going over the 20-foot wall, he found a drainage pipe that went under it. Instead of jumping the 30-foot gap, he used a broken piece of equipment as a bridge. When the moving obstacles tried to hit him, he learned their pattern and moved between them. He finished the course dead last, but he finished it. Vextar marked something on his electronic tablet and said nothing. The second test was combat simulation. Students fought against computer enemies in a virtual reality system. Each species used their natural gifts. The Krothan used their strength and armor. The Veltar used their mind powers. The energy-based Luxians could become pure light and move at incredible speed. June had no special powers. He was slower than most species, weaker than all of them, and his human body was soft compared to their natural armor. But humans had something else. They could learn and adapt faster than any species in the galaxy. In the first simulation, June lost quickly. The virtual enemies were too fast and too strong. But he watched how they moved and attacked. In the second simulation, he lasted longer. By the 10th simulation, he was winning. The computer enemies were programmed to fight against known alien combat styles. They were not programmed to fight against someone who changed tactics every single time. Other students began to notice something strange about the human. He lost every physical test, but he passed every thinking test. He got beaten up in every fight, but he never gave up. Ever. During zero-gravity combat training, students fought while floating in space. Most aliens had trouble with the 3-dimensional movement. June had grown up playing video games that worked the same way. While others struggled to understand up and down, he moved through the weightless environment like he was swimming. Vextar made the training harder for June specifically. Extra weights during runs. More difficult opponents and simulations. Longer hours of physical punishment designed to make him quit. June took everything Vextar gave him. When the instructor broke his ribs during combat practice, June wrapped them with tape and kept training. When Vextar made him run until his feet bled, June ran some more. When the alien used psychological torture to break his spirit, June treated it like a puzzle to solve. The other students started to get nervous around him. There was something unsettling about watching someone take that much punishment and keep smiling. The Makari were famous for tolerating pain, but even they stopped their exercises to watch June continue training with injuries that would send them to the medical bay. At night, when other students relaxed or slept, June studied. He borrowed books about Krothan anatomy from the Academy Library. He watched videos of Krothan combat styles. He learned about their culture, their history, their weaknesses. His roommate Kix asked him why he was learning so much about their instructor species. "Know your enemy," June said simply. "Vextar is not your enemy," Kix replied. "He is your teacher." June looked up from his books and smiled. His face was still bruised from that morning's training session. "Same thing," he said. 3 months into training, June was not the same person who had stepped off the transport ship. His body had changed from the constant punishment and exercise. Muscles had grown where he never had them before. Scars covered his arms and back from training accidents that would have killed weaker beings. But the biggest changes were not physical. His mind had adapted to think like a predator. Every movement, every exercise, every lesson was stored away and turned into something useful. Where other students saw impossible challenges, June saw puzzles waiting to be solved. The Academy's survival course was held on the station's moon. The surface was a frozen wasteland with temperatures that dropped to 200 degrees below zero. The air was so thin that most species needed breathing equipment just to stay conscious. Students were dropped alone on the surface with basic supplies. They had to survive for 7 days and find their way to an extraction point 50 miles away. The course was designed to push each species to their absolute limits. The Crothan used their natural armor to protect against the cold, but moved slowly to save energy. The Veltar worked in mental groups, sharing information across vast distances. The fire-based Ignis species created heat bubbles around themselves but had to rest frequently to recharge their energy. June did something different. Something that confused the instructors watching from orbit. He thrived. The sub-zero cold that slowed Crothan reflexes reminded him of winter camping trips with his father in the Korean mountains. The thin air that left Veltar gasping was similar to the high-altitude training he had done as a marathon runner back home. His human body, evolved on a world with changing seasons and extreme environments, adapted to the conditions faster than species that came from more comfortable planets. On the second day, when other students were struggling to find food, June was setting traps and hunting the small creatures that lived beneath the ice. While others rationed their water supplies, he had figured out how to melt ice efficiently and purify it using techniques he had learned in Earth's military survival manuals. By the fourth day, he was ahead of students who had started with significant advantages. The instructors watching the satellite feeds could not understand what they were seeing. The physically weakest student was outperforming warriors from species that had dominated galactic combat for centuries. Vextar watched June's progress on the monitors with growing confusion. The human moved across the frozen landscape with purpose and confidence. He made shelters that were better designed than those built by species with natural engineering abilities. He found food sources that advanced scanners had missed. "How is this possible?" asked Instructor Zal, a floating crystal being who taught advanced tactics. "His species has no environmental adaptations for this kind of survival." Vextar studied the screen showing June building a fire using materials scrounged from the frozen ground. "I am beginning to think we do not understand humans as well as we believed," he said slowly. On the final day of the survival course, something happened that had never occurred in the Academy's history. June reached the extraction point 6 hours early. Not only had he survived, he had made the journey look easy. The psychological warfare portion of training began the following week. Students were subjected to mental attacks designed to break their ability to think clearly under stress. Fear chemicals were pumped into their air supply. Loud noises and flashing lights disrupted their sleep patterns. Holographic projections showed them their worst nightmares in vivid detail. The training was meant to prepare them for enemies who used mind control and emotional manipulation in combat. Most students struggled to maintain focus while their brains were under constant assault. June turned the attacks into advantages. When fear chemicals made his heart race, he used the extra adrenaline to move faster during combat exercises. When sleep deprivation made other students confused and angry, June's mind became sharper and more focused. When nightmare projections tried to terrify him, he studied them like training videos and learned to identify the technology creating them. The instructors had to keep increasing the intensity of the psychological attacks because June kept adapting to them. What should have broken his mind instead taught him to function without normal sensory input. He learned to fight while blind, deaf, and disoriented. Other students began to avoid him during meal times and recreation periods. There was something disturbing about watching someone remain calm and focused while under mental assault that would drive most beings insane. Kix, his roommate, packed his belongings and requested a transfer to different quarters. "You are not natural," Kix told June before leaving. "The things that hurt us make you stronger. It is not right." June helped Kix carry his bags to the door and wished him well. He felt no anger toward his former roommate. Fear was a logical response to something you did not understand. Alone in his quarters that night, June continued studying Crothan anatomy textbooks. He had memorized the location of every major organ, joint, and nerve cluster in Vextar's species. He knew which pressure points would cause temporary paralysis and which ones would cause permanent damage. Vextar had made a mistake when he broke June's nose on the first day. He had shown the human exactly what kind of teacher he was going to be. Now June was ready to show him exactly what kind of student he had created. 6 months after Vextar broke June's nose, it was time for the final examination. Every student had to face their instructor in single combat. It was not meant to be a fair fight. It was meant to teach them that real war was never fair. Most students lasted less than 30 seconds against their instructors. The smart ones surrendered quickly to avoid serious injury. The proud ones fought until they were knocked unconscious. Either way, everyone understood the lesson. They were still students, not warriors. The main arena filled with spectators. Students, instructors, and academy officials came to watch the final exams. It was tradition. It was also entertainment. June entered the arena wearing simple training clothes and soft shoes. He carried no weapons because none were allowed. This was hand-to-hand combat only. He looked small and fragile under the bright lights. Vextar entered from the opposite side wearing his ceremonial combat gear. The black armor plates that covered his natural exoskeleton gleamed like polished metal. His forearms moved with practiced grace as he warmed up. Each arm ended in claws that could cut through steel. The crowd grew quiet as the two opponents faced each other in the center of the arena. The size difference was shocking. Vextar stood more than 3 feet taller than June and probably weighed 4 times as much. "This is your last chance to surrender with honor," Vextar said. His voice echoed through the arena speakers. "I have no desire to seriously injure you." June looked up at his instructor and smiled. It was the same smile he had worn while studying Crothan anatomy books late at night. The same smile that had made his roommate request a transfer. "I understand," June said quietly. "You have taught me well." The referee, a floating sphere of energy, signaled the start of combat. Vextar moved exactly as June expected him to. Crothan combat doctrine emphasized overwhelming force applied quickly. End fights fast before opponents could adapt or find weaknesses. It was a strategy that had worked against every known species in the galaxy. Except humans had never been properly studied. Vextar's first attack was a four-armed combination that should have ended the match instantly. His primary arms came down like hammers while his secondary arms swept inward to catch June if he tried to dodge. But June did not try to dodge. He moved into the attack instead of away from it. The crowd gasped as June seemed to walk directly into Vextar's striking arms. But he had positioned himself in the one spot where the Crothan's 4 arms could not all reach him at once. He absorbed the impacts that did connect, letting his human flexibility bend instead of break. Vextar's claws scraped across June's ribs and back, drawing blood but not finding vital organs. The human rolled with each strike, using momentum to stay close instead of being knocked away. This was not how the fight was supposed to go. Vextar backed up and attacked again, this time with more force. His claws left deep cuts in the arena floor where June had been standing moments before. But the human was no longer there. He moved like water, always one step ahead of where the attacks would land. The first minute passed. Then the second. Then the third. In the spectator seats, other instructors began to pay closer attention. Crothan matches never lasted this long. Vextar should have finished his opponent and been walking out of the arena by now. Instead, he was breathing hard and looking frustrated. June showed no signs of fatigue. The cuts on his body bled freely, but he ignored them completely. He had learned to function with much worse injuries during 6 months of training. Pain was just information, and right now it was telling him that his plan was working. Vextar began to make mistakes. Small ones at first. He telegraphed his attacks slightly, allowing June to position himself better. He left openings between combinations as his coordination suffered from the extended effort. June cataloged every mistake and filed them away for future use. He was not trying to win yet. He was waiting for the perfect moment. The 5th minute passed. The 6th. The 7th. Vextar's attacks became wilder and less controlled. Crothan physiology was designed for explosive bursts of activity, not sustained combat. His species had evolved to dominate through quick, decisive victories. But humans had evolved differently. They had evolved as persistence hunters on a world where prey animals were faster and stronger. They had learned to chase their targets until exhaustion made them vulnerable. Now, for the first time in his long career, Vextar was experiencing what it felt like to be hunted. The realization hit him during the 8th minute of combat. June was not trying to survive the fight. He was not hoping to last long enough to earn respect through courage. He was waiting for Vextar to become weak enough to kill. The crowd had gone completely silent. They were watching something that should have been impossible. A human was not just surviving against a Crothan warrior. He was winning. 10 minutes into the fight, Vextar was no longer the same warrior who had broken June's nose on the first day. His breathing came in ragged gasps. Sweat dripped from his black exoskeleton onto the arena floor. His forearms moved slower now, each attack requiring more effort than the last. June looked exactly the same as when the fight had started. His breathing was steady and calm. Blood covered his training clothes from dozens of small cuts, but he moved like the injuries did not exist. Where Vextar was weakening, June seemed to be getting stronger. The crowd watched in absolute silence. Nothing like this had ever happened in the Academy's 5,000-year history. Students were supposed to lose quickly and learn humility. Instructors were supposed to demonstrate the vast difference between teacher and pupil. Instead, they were witnessing the slow, methodical destruction of everything they thought they knew about combat. June had stopped defending completely. Now he moved forward with each of Vextar's attacks, getting closer to the exhausted Crothan. His movements were precise and calculated, like a machine that had been programmed for a single purpose. Vextar threw a desperate combination with all four arms, putting everything he had left into the attack. It was the kind of strike that could shatter stone, the kind of technique that had made his species the most feared warriors in the galaxy. June stepped inside the attack and caught Vextar's primary arm at the joint. For 6 months he had studied Crothan anatomy. He knew exactly where the weakness points were located. He knew exactly how much pressure was needed to cause damage. The sound that came from Vextar's arm was like breaking pottery. The joint that connected his primary arm to his shoulder separated with a wet crack that echoed through the arena. Vextar screamed and staggered backward, his primary arm hanging useless at his side. The crowd made sounds of shock and disbelief in dozens of different languages. But June was not finished. He had learned many things during his time at the Academy. He had learned that pain was temporary but knowledge was permanent. He had learned that being weak could be an advantage if your enemy underestimated you. Most importantly, he had learned that humans did not fight to win quickly. They fought to make sure their enemies could never fight again. June moved forward again as Vextar tried to create distance between them. The Crothan's remaining 3 arms flailed wildly, but his coordination was gone. Fear and pain had replaced the confident warrior who had started the fight. With surgical precision, June struck the nerve center behind Vextar's left knee. The instructor's leg collapsed and he fell to one knee. Then June hit the pressure point on his secondary arm, causing temporary paralysis that left the limb hanging dead. Each strike was exactly where June had planned to place it. Each technique was something he had practiced in his mind hundreds of times while studying late at night. Vextar tried to stand but his damaged leg would not support his weight. He looked up at June with something that had never appeared in Crothan eyes before when facing a human opponent. "Terror. Please," Vextar whispered. "I surrender. The match is over." June knelt down so they were face to face. His expression was calm and almost gentle, like a teacher explaining something to a student. "You broke my nose on the first day," June said quietly. "You told me I was too weak for real combat. You were wrong." June placed his hands on either side of Vextar's neck, fingers positioned exactly where the Crothan's spine connected to the skull. It was the most vulnerable point in their anatomy, the place where a precise strike could cause permanent paralysis. "This is real combat," June said. The pressure he applied was perfect. Not enough to kill, but exactly enough to separate the spinal column at the crucial junction point. Vextar's body went limp as all sensation below his neck disappeared. The arena was so quiet that the only sound was June's steady breathing. He carefully lifted Vextar's paralyzed body and stood up. The Crothan was much larger and heavier, but June carried him easily. 6 months of impossible training had made him much stronger than he looked. June walked slowly out of the arena, carrying his former instructor in the traditional honor guard position reserved for fallen warriors. Not as an insult, but as a sign of respect for the teacher who had created him. The spectators parted silently as he passed. Students and instructors alike stared at the small human carrying a warrior who had seemed invincible just minutes before. In the days that followed, emergency meetings were held throughout the galactic government. Humanity's application to join galactic civilization was reviewed with new urgency. What had seemed like a simple diplomatic courtesy now looked like something much more dangerous. The Academy's ancient motto, carved in stone above the main entrance for over 2 millennia, was quietly changed. The old words had read, "What does not kill you makes you stronger." The new version added a warning that no one had thought necessary before: "What does not kill you makes you stronger, unless you are facing what it made."